Hi, I'm Mick Cox from Brisbane, Australia, and I'm about to show you an amazing discovery that I've made that describes exactly how our sun star was formed. And in this same principle as to how our sun star was formed, you will see in logical form how every sun star was formed throughout the galaxies and the entire universe. I will also describe how our entire solar system, including all of the planets, were formed, and a number of other natural disastrous things like cyclones, hurricanes, earthquakes, and volcanoes. Now, my trail of discovery started 20 years ago when I went into the state library, and in the state library I saw a diagram of our sun star that looked like this. This diagram of our sun star showed magnetic lines that spanned out from it, and these radiuses were 10,000 billion kilometres long. It also said in that giant atlas that we undergo a planet alignment every 500 years. And it said that this 500-year cycle we were undergoing, or have completed now, we would align in the northern hemisphere of our solar system. I should also say that two of the lines, or set of the lines, were shorter than the other set upon our Earth. The foundation principle of creating energy is movement within a magnetic field. I came up, of course, with the 4 seasons. I came up with the 4 king tides that we experience throughout the year. And from what I saw in the tide book, there were wicker lines each side of the king tide lines. And if we look at a simple magnet, we'll see that the lines are what we call equidistant, meaning that the pairs of lines are an equal distance apart. This is an equal distance, and this is an equal distance. So, equidistant lines. Now, there are other tides next to the king tides that reflect an equidistant ley line. Now, the magnetic lines that spanned 10,000 billion kilometres long were very obviously curved due to the velocity of the centre gas ball spinning. And we might say that it's not possible for magnetic lines to curve. Well, we do know that it is possible to curve light. And when we curve light, we get out of it a rainbow effect. The next step I took in trying to figure out how our sun star was formed was to actually slow the velocity down of the centre gas ball. When I slowed the velocity down of the centre gas ball, I ended up, of course, with a straightened set of magnetic lines. And then in a flash it came to me when I was thinking back about a telescope of a gun, and I realized that it's not 4 magnetic lines. It's actually 2 magnetic lines. Diagram A shows the velocity of the centre ball slowed down and the magnetic lines straightened. Diagram B shows the size of the amount of gas in the centre ball reduced, and thus the centre ball reducing in size, and diagram C shows that ball reduced even smaller again, and diagram D is virtually no gas at all and just the magnetic lines crossing, which is what we're going to look at next to try and discover how the magnetic lines ever came to be. By realizing that our sun star was 2 magnetic lines instead of 4, I found in a reference that said when magnetic lines cross over, they create a magnetic pump. And a magnetic pump happens when magnetic lines cross over and they heat gases to 1,000,000 degrees. But our sun star is in space, and it's a controlled burn where no oxygen takes place at 5,600 degrees Celsius. Now, the next step that I realized by reducing or removing that gas ball, what I realized quickly was that our sun star was a magnetic pump. And all sun stars throughout the galaxies and universes were magnetic. Our universe are magnetic pumps. And magnetic pumps are magnetic lines that cross over and heat gases to 1,000,000 degrees. In every magnetic pump, there is a magnetic field created when the magnetic lines cross over. That magnetic field possesses an energy, and that magnetic field also possesses, as all magnetic fields possess, a frequency. Now, I believe that that magnetic field that resonated at a certain frequency attracted atoms of, obviously, of hydrogen and helium to that point where the frequency or magnetic field was at its strongest. And very obviously, hydrogen and helium atoms from all over our empty solar system accumulated at that point. As hydrogen and helium atoms accumulated at that point, that crossover point, and when the hydrogen and helium atoms accumulated, they grew to a certain size and grew to a certain amount, and then they ignited. When did they ignite? Well, we know that solid mass atoms have a tendency to bounce up and down. We know that liquid atoms have a tendency to slide past each other. And we know that gas atoms have a tendency to collide. And with the collisions happening and with the heat that was created by the magnetic pump, we know that it would have ignited. The next step, when we took away the gas ball, was figuring out where the magnetic lines came from to create the magnetic pump, or the crossover point, to start off with. And in understanding how this happens, all we have to realize is that there are sun stars, neighbouring sun stars, right next door to us, which are absolutely enormous in comparison to our sun star. With that in mind, I figured out the next step. As we said, all sun stars are merely magnetic pumps which consist of magnetic lines that span out into each solar system, and they attract atoms of hydrogen and helium to the magnetic field, or the frequency, with the frequency that exists there. Now, in realizing that our sun star's magnetic lines were curved due to the velocity of the center ball, then that said that all sun stars obviously have rotating magnetic lines. And I believe that the rotating magnetic lines spanned out from the neighbouring solar systems and projected their magnetic lines to create that crossover point. Very obviously, from the original diagram, that these lines were projected in here. Very obviously, from the original diagram, we can say that those lines were projected into our empty solar system every 3 months. The magnetic lines would come in and cross over, and come in and cross over every 3 months, and every 3 months atoms of hydrogen and helium would be attracted to that point and would probably linger in space until there are enough there to get that collision thing and the heat thing happening at the same time, and eventually that our sun star ignited and started rotating in its own magnetic field and existed as the sun star that we have today. The center velocity sped up and the magnetic lines curved. And very obviously, from seeing that, we can also say that this is how this sun star was created, and this is how this sun star was created as well, and of course every sun star in the entire universe. If we remember our original diagram and realize that those magnetic lines still project in here today, If we remember the original diagram of our sun star and realize that the position of our Earth at some times are in line with these projecting lines from neighbouring sun stars, we will realize that why earthquakes and other events happen. I'm going to show you a video now of a piece of cotton suspended from the ceiling and a coat hanger wire that's been straightened out, and its own natural magnetism has turned this coat hanger into a compass. The coat hanger wire itself is probably close to about 2.5 feet long, about 700 millimeters long, and it's been suspended from the ceiling now for about 3 or 4 months, and I've been watching that compass move on the occasion. And very obviously it's these magnetic lines that are projected into here at some times of the year. What I'm about to show you is a wire coat hanger that's been straightened out. There's been no magnetism induced into it. It's just simply been straightened out, and it's hanging from the ceiling on a cotton thread. Where I've paused it at the moment, if you look at the line that's on the ceiling next to the light fitting, that line is pretty well in parallel with true north. It's in parallel with the road that's out the front of my house, which in accordance to the Refidex, the road is pointing to true north. Now, the let's call it a compass needle. The wire coat hanger compass needle is at the moment pointing to about 5 degrees right, that's clockwise, of true north. It should be sitting about 8 degrees left, that's anti-clockwise, of true north. And you'll see now as I play the video how it goes back to in real time. This is where we'll see the coat hanger compass wire. There it goes now. It's going to drift all the way back to about 8 degrees left of true north. That line on the ceiling, as I said, is true north, and you'll see that the wire coat hanger suspended by cotton is at true north now, and it's going to drift back to where magnetic north is any moment, and it'll sit there for some time again. At the moment, the magnetic lines that are being projected into our Earth at this very time, it's Easter Friday at the moment, 2012, are quite strong happening at this moment. See it's pointing to magnetic north now, about where it is, and it'll sit there for quite some weeks before it will move. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the video into rewind, which takes us back again. You'll see it go back to magnetic north. There we go, back to magnetic north, and then we go back to, and then we go into play again, and I'm going to press fast forward now, and you'll see this is over a period, I think it's about 2, maybe 3 minutes. Now, looking at our Earth on a slightly larger scale, we can realize that our sun star definitely has magnetic lines which project through it, and at certain points the magnetic lines from neighbouring sun stars will project through us as well. We know that the neighbouring sun stars project into here every 3 months from the original diagram of our sun star, which showed 4 3-month periods. Now, at times when these magnetic lines project in, we suffer the influence, and it might not be the actual magnetic lines, it might be just ley lines. Remember, there are a number of ley lines that are equidistant that project with every magnetic line. Now, when it comes to electrical principles or magnetic principles in electrical theory, one of the major problems that we have in any magnetic field in electrical principles is the problem of eddy currents. Now, eddy currents are exactly that. Eddy currents can happen in high voltage cables. It can happen in micro voltage electronic circuits on heat sinks and etc. But eddy currents are vortexes, and vortexes that we suffer on Earth are, of course, cyclones and hurricanes. And also, I believe that these magnetic lines suck molten lava out when these magnetic lines are suddenly produced during a 4-hour or 8-hour period or something of true intensity, when we have another couple of planets set up like this in what they call a Hall effect in electronics. These magnetic lines are magnified or amplified and magnified and are projected at our Earth, and our Earth has molten lava sucked out of the core and through the crust, which creates volcanoes. Now, these things happen for just a momentary time, and they are intense magnetics, and they suck the iron ore out. Now, our Earth, we know that our Earth resonates at 8 Hertz. We know that our Earth has a resonance or its own frequency of 8 Hertz. I believe that the 8 Hertz only exists in the inner core. I believe that the outer crust is not resonating. And an example of that is when those magnetic lines come in at that perfect resonant frequency. Remember that this might be sun star B up here, and this might be our sun star here with one of its magnetic lines that are radiating through. If this were a north pole and this were a south pole, then the intense magnetic line will pull out molten magma, but it will also cut through the crust. When that magnetic line is at the perfect angle of injection, meaning it's pointing straight down into the crack where it's hitting the base every time, if I'm correct, and this is causing the tectonic plates, it is causing earthquakes, then evidence of that would be that sometimes when we have an earthquake, there's a liquid, they call it liquid earth, that comes out of the earth, and I believe that that liquid earth, that mud, would definitely be very, very magnetic. A long time ago, our planet existed with just one continent. It was one continent that was called Gondwana land or something like that, and the continents were carved up into the shapes that we see. I call those shapes of our continents the tennis ball patterns that were carved into our Earth. I believe that these tennis ball patterns were carved into the Earth by the magnetic lines that were suddenly struck at if this is our sun, and that's our neighbouring sun star, I believe that the magnetic lines were struck into our Earth when at perfect resonance with the 8 Hertz that existed in the centre core. Now, after our Earth was cut up into continents, after the time when all of our continents were carved up, all of the subspecies of dinosaurs located into their certain continents, and then we were struck by an asteroid. I believe that that asteroid sent us through space in what I call the pool ball effect. Now, this pool ball effect or snooker ball effect is the same as when two snooker balls hit each other. They get sent, one gets sent barreling through space. Now, space is roughly about minus 300 degrees Celsius. I believe that when we were pool balled, I believe that the front face that was sent, that received the blow, that received that 300 degrees Celsius, I believe that this front face was, of course, frozen, snap frozen. And if you remember, when the asteroid hit, it would have created heat. So there was heat in here, and there was freezing cold out here. So this would have been snap frozen, and I'm sure that the majority of this would have been snap frozen as well. But and we would have lost our atmosphere, which would have caused some freezing effect as well. Now, I believe that there would have been some parts that were kept good. That explains exactly how some of the dinosaurs, like crocodiles, made it through. They were in the waters, and they were able, once our Earth came into a stopped position again, then the crocodiles would have been able to crawl out of that water and bask in the sun and etc. When we landed again in this new position, new orbital position, and those crocodiles crawled out of the water and started basking in the sun again, and then all of the ice thawed out and melted, I believe what happened next was a new set of magnetic lines were projected in, and because we're in a new position, orbital position, I believe that there was a new set of lines carved into the continents. And I believe that those magnetic lines are what we now call the tectonic plates. Our original sun-star diagram showed curved magnetic lines that spanned 10,000 billion kilometers in radius, 20,000 billion kilometers in diameter. In similar evidence, I'm going to say that when we shine white light into a prism, the white light bends and refracts, science says, and it creates colours we know as the rainbow. Well, each individual colour very obviously possesses, as science tells us, its own individual frequency. And each individual frequency cannot exist without a magnetic energy and a magnetic field. Now, we know that the energy and the field itself is absolutely, totally microscopic. What I'd like to do now is remove each of these magnetic lines singularly and place them on the board in a parallel pattern next to each other, remembering that one set of these magnetic lines is shorter than the other in accordance to the original diagram I saw of our sun star, and realizing that one of the sun stars, neighboring sun stars, is smaller than the other, so its magnetic lines are going to be smaller, and that's why one of the set of the magnetic lines is smaller. With both of the lines, magnetic lines, extracted from the original diagram and placed in parallel here, this is our crossover point here. Now, science tells us that we have 4 metal planets, which includes our Earth, third rock from the Sun. They tell us that we have 4 giant gas ball planets, and science tells us that we have 5 dwarf planets, although one of those dwarf planets on the very outside does a figure 8 flex in and out of the solar system next door. Now, remembering that light refracts or curves, and as a consequence of light bending, frequencies are produced which produce each colour of the rainbow, we're going to look at the magnetic lines with that same principle of the rainbow in effect. And we're going to look at the ascending line of planets coming out from the Sun, and the Sun would be in the centre. Actually, that's wrong. It's a tricky one to get this. We can see that each of the planets would slip between. Now, if we were to redraw if we're to redraw this diagram and draw it just as by itself as one line, all three of these diagrams, this is those two lines overlapping each other with our sun star and the crossover point in the center. That crossover point where our sun exists is in this diagram here, and this shows those planets on those lines drawn up there. And this diagram shows the ascending line of each planet as they come out from the sun, all projected in a line. Say this is the diagram that would display our planetary alignment that happens every 500 years. So we can see that all three of these diagrams are exactly the same, and that this diagram here is the two magnetic lines crossed over, and this magnetic line overlapping that magnetic line here. And we can see how our sun star was created. We can see how our planets were created. It's a little bit rushed, so I had to use a light, and hopefully we can see enough. But in the original diagram, how the magnetic lines curved and refracted and created frequencies and the planets were created, you can see that these are the metallic planets, these are the gas ball planets, these are the dwarf planets. Science says that Mars appears to have a flat spot on it where quite a large chunk was taken out by an asteroid. We know that the frequency that was created where Earth was formed was in resonance frequency with mainly ions. But where Mars was created, very obviously the material that was created that was in resonant frequency with the frequency that existed where Mars was formed was of a softer material, because in the ascending line it's closer to being a gas ball, closer to the gas ball planet, or it's heading that direction of the gas ball planet. Now, what I'm about to tell you is that eventually these planets grew big enough and dropped off the line, or as well as dropping off the line, they would have possessed their own magnetic field, and they would have been repelled off the magnetic lines. And when they were repelled off the magnetic lines, I believe that they would have been on a collision path, a couple of them would have been on a collision path with each other, and especially Earth being in a collision path with Mars. Well, as a bit of study and homework for the kids, in that same theory that shining light into a prism, the light is curved or bent or refracted, and it produces frequencies out here, and we know that frequencies come from an electromagnetic field. Then I think it would be good homework for the kids to create themselves a rainbow, a man-made rainbow in their bedroom, and grow themselves a few planets. Of course, kids, you're going to have the prism and the rainbow all set up for maybe 1 million or 1 billion or 1 trillion years, but hey, it'll be worth it in the long run, and probably more value than a bonsai tree. So, look, it's goodbye for now. I hope you've enjoyed this theory. To me, it's not a theory, I've got to tell you. I believe in it 1,000%. And it's something that I believe is soaked in truth, if I can put it that way. One last very important item I forgot to mention is that in the ascending line of the metallic planets and the gas planets and the dwarf planets, when we look out the window at our Earth, we see green, nothing but green. But from space, NASA have showed us photographs of our Earth with a blue hue, or a seemingly blue glow, or a blue aura of energy about it. I believe that it's because of that same principle as the rainbow. That is why our Earth is blue. That is why Mars is red. And that is why Saturn, I think it is Saturn is yellow. And that is why Uranus is orange. Or Jupiter is orange. You can't tell me that the colours don't apply to the same principle as a rainbow. As a bit of study and homework for the kids, in that same theory that shining light into a prism, the light is curved or bent or refracted, and it produces frequencies out here, and we know that frequencies come from an electromagnetic field. Then I think it would be good homework for the kids to create themselves a rainbow, a man-made rainbow in their bedroom, and grow themselves a few planets. Of course, kids, you're going to have the prism and the rainbow all set up for maybe 1 million or 1 billion or 1 trillion years, but hey, it'll be worth it in the long run, and probably more value than a bonsai tree. So, look, it's goodbye for now. I hope you've enjoyed this theory. To me, it's not a theory, I've got to tell you. I believe in it 1,000%. And it's something that I believe is soaked in truth, if I can put it that way.